I was done. I was no longer interested in being here. I was a loser. I was the ultimate loser. Put somebody in my life who shows me the way, and I will do whatever they say, and I will build wealth. And I promise, everything I build, I will teach, and I will show, and I will give back and contribute. And I stood up, and I felt this chill, and I looked out the kitchen window over at the property I owned, a property I had under agreement, and just multifamily. And I said, I'm going to own this block.
Welcome to the RealPropPro podcast, where strategy, innovation, and wealth converge to redefine real estate investing.
Hello, and welcome back to the RealPropPro podcast. I'm your host, Ian Dietler. I do fix and flip investing in Sacramento, California. This show brings you the mindset, methods, and stories behind real people building real wealth through real estate. RealPropPro is where new and seasoned investors go to learn about wholesaling, fix and flips, tax deed and tax lien investing, creative finance, multifamily, and more. Check out free resources at RealPropPro.com. Today's guest is Gualter Amarelo, an absolute powerhouse in multifamily. He is an investor, asset manager, and private lender. Over the last few years, he has scaled from small multifamily properties to owning over 600 units across the Midwest. He's flipped homes, built portfolios, closed massive value-add deals, and mentored dozens of investors along the way. On top of all of that, he has started a movement called 100 Millionaires. I cannot wait to talk to him about this vision. And Gualter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ian. I love that intro, by the way. I love that you right at the end were like, yeah, 100 millionaires? What's that about? Glad to be here, man. I love what we're doing. Real estate is hard. It's complex. And so to have people teach and kind of guide through it is necessary. I think very few people know I spent over $300,000 on coaches and gurus and mentors, and I got a return on investment on all of that. But I hear a lot of people who say they went and spent $35,000 and didn't get a value. So I think it takes a lot of discipline and grit, and you need the right mentors, and not all of it's going to be expensive, but you just got to be out there and doing it. So what you guys are doing is huge. It's just tremendous. The value, whether they paid for it or not, what you guys are doing is, we all need that. It's a game changer. So thank you, Ian.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to come here and chat with us and, give us some of your wisdom and talk about all the stuff that you've learned throughout the years in, the ups and downs of real estate. Before we get started, I want to talk to you about what was life like for you growing up as a kid in Fall River, Massachusetts.
Yeah, wow. So I grew up in the hood, and so I still invest in areas like that because I'm comfortable there. It makes me feel like home in being around large buildings, multifamilies. I understand that an apartment can be a good, place to live. Fortunately, my grandfather owned the house. He was a Portuguese immigrant. My father came here when he was 6 years old. And I was raised with that mentality of work hard, be a good person. And my grandfather always owned the house. My dad used to say, we can't do that because of the landlord. And I'm like, well, isn't the landlord my grandfather? And they were like, yes. And because he's your grandfather and because the landlord, we respect his wishes in the house, and we keep the house clean. And we used to do work in the house. I remember getting on the roof, not the roof of the three family, but the roof of the garage, and doing the roof there. And we had another small roof. So I grew up with the work, and I used to bond with my family when we were doing work. That was like my grandmother would bring us together for a big project like building a patio in the backyard or re-roofing the garage or doing the driveway. So that was like my family's way of getting together. We wouldn't see each other, right? Months at a time, we wouldn't see each other. Then my uncles would come over, my cousins would come over. We'd be working on the property, renovating a unit or doing something outside. And then there'd be food and there'd be wine that we made. We made the wine ourselves. So growing up it was all about work, right? The family was about work, and we didn't look at the word work as a bad thing. We were like, oh, we're going to work together. It was like grind time meant family time. And I've always had a very good association with work. Later on, I read the book Richest Man in Babylon, and I was like doubled down on work. I absolutely love work, and it set me free. I think a lot of people don't talk about that in this business. There's too many syndicators telling you that if you're swinging the hammer, you're not making money. And I have to admit, as an operator now with over 600 units, it's true, right? If I'm in the space, swinging a hammer, ripping up carpets, I'm not making money. But if I can't speak to my staff about what they're doing and say, man, oh, wow, that was a lot of work. I know what that's like. My rapport with them is just so tight because I actually know the work they're doing and that I appreciate them and they appreciate that I know what they're doing. So my childhood was work, and then I started working at 14, got my first job, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs have a very similar path. We started working early, we were grinding early, and I got into real estate kind of because of HGTV, right? I was just sitting there watching with my girlfriend one day, and I just got tired of it. I was like, dude, like, why are we watching this? We should be doing this. Let's go buy a house. We were 21 years old. We were like, well, let's go buy a house. And we did. You know, we bought a house in 2008. I was 22 when I bought the first one, and that was a move-in flip. Financed it same way everybody else does, FHA, you know, owner occupied. I never should have bought a single family. I tried to buy a multi. Was not sold on that idea. So my pitch was we'll buy the single and then we'll flip it. Like we'll sell it one day. And she was like, we'll buy a bigger house. And I was like, maybe we should buy two. Maybe we should buy a multifamily and a house. Then we went through a divorce because I couldn't get her to agree to that part. So I went and I bought two multifamilies. Then we got divorced, and that was the lowest point of my life to this day. To this day, it's been a decade since then, and I don't think anything has ever hit me as hard as that divorce did. And like I didn't have much, you know, I had two properties, and I went through having to split that stuff up. I gave her all my 401k. I borrowed money from my family. I kept the properties. But the only thing I kept in all of it was those two buildings, a three family and a two family. And she ended up walking away with all the cash, and I stacked up credit cards or whatever I had to, and it was scary, man. It was scary. I took a year off of real estate. I got my real estate license, which turns out as an accountant, I'm an operator now. I'm a phenomenal salesperson now. Then my job was accounting, and I didn't talk to anybody. Nobody knew me. I was buying real estate off of MLS. I had no relationships. So I took a year off of buying because the only way I knew how to buy was with my own money. I had never done anything other than an FHA loan. So it was like, I thought I was going to be out of the game, but this podcast, that's why I love these podcasts, Bigger Pockets, got me feeling like I can take a year off and be stronger. And I embraced that. I just embraced it. I'm not out of the game. I'm just taking a year off to get stronger. I got my real estate license and totally sucked at that. I only sold 8 houses in my first year. It was like all friends from my previous job. So like, thank God I worked and people knew my work ethic. That was the only thing that transferred over was my work ethic from accounting to this real estate business. No, but that's how I got started, man. I started with a couple of easy wins. My family was a huge part of it, bro. My first house, we tore it apart. My family was there with me every weekend for like 6 months, 8 months. Every weekend we were there ripping the roof off. We raising ceilings. Like if you could touch a part of a house, we touched it. I remember my uncle cut his first pipe in 28 years as a contractor. He cut his first pipe in my house. And he's like, dude, I've never cut a pipe in all my years as a carpenter. I've never, ever cut a pipe. He had the first water leak in a project. He's like, it's my own nephew's house. I cannot believe this. He was so bummed. But it was a memory to me now. Like I look at that and it's like, dude, my family literally bled for me in in that first property. And I made a commitment to never to ask them to do it again in other properties as I've scaled up the business. I just said, look, I got to find guys who'll work and do it the way I'll do it, but I'm not going to bring my family into this because I killed them that summer. It was, man, I'm thankful for it because now my grandparents aren't with me anymore, but my grandparents were there in the yard. They were doing stuff. And those are like some of the last memories I have was while they were still healthy was working on my property with me. So that's where I came from, man.
That's a great story. I also have had many friends and family come to help me on flip projects, so I know exactly what you're talking about. It's just, it's such a good and bad thing, like you said. It's so nice to have a community, a tribe that is there for you with whatever you need, and at the same time, it's like it's kind of hard to, pay them when you're just getting started. So they're kind of doing it on favors. And like you said, you're feeding them and stuff like that, maybe giving them some beer or something. But I love that story because I've had very similar experiences. My mom will sometimes show up and do some yard work or try to paint some houses. So shout out to my mom. Love her for all the support she's given me throughout the years. I want to take a step back a little bit. I want to do a little bit of a deep dive into kind of, you growing up. I heard that you went through homeschool, and can you talk a little bit about that and how that kind of shaped the way that you grew up?
Yeah, it's cool because it's I don't know if it's cool, but it's cool now, right? To say I was homeschooled now is cool. It's a badge of honor because I was one of the early people in that space, but we didn't do it because of COVID. We did it because we were in a religious cult, and my parents did not want me learning about not religion stuff, right? So they didn't also we were so cultish that they didn't want to put me in like a private school. We were so broke they couldn't afford a private school anyway. And so my mom thought she was going to homeschool us. Now, fun fact, I love my mom, and she also was a dropout, a high school dropout in 11th grade. So she never graduated. So this woman is now teaching me and my brother. And a lot of what came out of that was he and I had to learn how to read, and she taught us that very well. And from there, we had to teach ourselves how to teach, how to learn. And so she'd give us a book, and we had to figure out how to get the information to pass a test. And me and my brother became very good test passers, very good accumulators of information and knowledge. Uh, One of the things that I think was very impactful for us is she was smart enough to get videos from a school out of Pensacola, and we learned science and math and history and English all from this training course that was digital. Like we were doing this on VHS videos again. This is not like today. You go online, you get these online courses for your kids that are really well documented. This was somebody stuck a camera in the middle of a classroom in Pensacola, and then they'd send you the VHS video, and that was how I was going to learn biology, was through the VHS video. I could not ask questions. There was no online forum. It was just, here's the books that go with the video, and good luck passing that test.
Yeah.
And what it did to me, because me and my brother were very different. I would say learning with that style was not good for me. I would sit there in the kitchen from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night and not have my shit figured out. I couldn't figure out math. I couldn't figure out history. I couldn't figure out things that didn't seem important to me. But science, I slayed science. I was obsessed. I wanted to learn it. The answers were so easy for me, but I couldn't figure out these other topics. And my brother was the opposite. He'd be done by 1 o'clock, right? He'd be in the class, like nail it all, and then be done. And he absorbs information differently from the way I absorb information. So I had a lot of problems with my mom growing up, man. There was a lot of challenges because she would call me lazy. She'd say I'm dumb. I've had these conversations with her as an adult. She's like, I can't believe I said that. It's totally wrong. And at the time, she was, an unaware alcoholic. So there was just a lot of psychological abuse going on in the house. Me and my brother look back now as we've seen therapists, and we're like, what? Holy, I didn't realize that this was all very, very bad that we were growing up in. Grew up in a Christian family, and that's all we perceived ourselves as, really good people. And so our parents must have been really good people. And looking back, they could have done significantly better with us. But a lot of the pain that I grew up with for years, I hated my mom. I had to get out of the house. Like my fight for financial freedom comes from my fight to get out of my own house. Right? There was a lot of tension there. And so I'm blessed for. I'm thankful for. I wouldn't continue to buy and grow as much as I have if I didn't always have this chip on my shoulder of I got to be more successful. I never want to go back to being controlled by somebody. And like that grind comes out of kind of the abuse or mistreatment we had as children. But we were loved. So I say
Yeah.
all of that, and I say my mom and my dad loved the heck out of us. And my dad was working three jobs, so he was never really there. But if I had a math problem and I was there at 8 o'clock at night, my dad would sit down with me and say, "Son, don't worry, we're gonna figure this out. Math is solvable. Math can be solved." He said, "There's no math problem on the planet that cannot be solved with a little bit of time and a little bit of effort. So let's sit down, let's take a look at it." And that was like my saving grace. My dad was working three jobs, but when he was home, he was home. Right? My dad, I'd have 30 minutes with him a day, 15 minutes with him a day. My dad he would wake me up at 4:30 in the morning because he was like, "I'm not seeing my sons. They're going to bed before I get home. Like I'm not seeing them at all." So he'd wake me up at 4:30 in the morning to spend 30 minutes with me before he got ready. And like those are the things that I think about now as an adult, as a person with a father with a son. I'm just like, man, like I'll wake my kid up just so he knows that dad cares. Because I'm sitting there watching him while he's sleeping, but he doesn't know. He doesn't know I'm there watching him while he's sleeping. If I wake him up, yeah, he's a little frustrated I woke him up, but then for 15, 20 minutes before I get back to work, or before I go to the gym, like he sees me and he knows I'm present. So if you're homeschooling your kids, like you gotta also make sure that they feel like kids. You know, there's a component to it where they feel loved, and that I think my dad did a really good job with that, and he still does.
That math problem stuff that you were just talking about sounds like it's going to be some foreshadowing to learning how to invest in real estate. So we'll get to that in just a moment. There's some other stories that I love hearing you talk about. So can you talk about some of your first W-2 jobs? I think you worked at a bakery or some type of bakery. Can you elaborate on that and tell our listeners how that went for you?
So I got my job at the bakery because I started dating a girl. I think there's always a girl, right? So I was working at Walmart thinking I was the man, right? Because I went from a person in a department to a department manager. My brother had gone up to supervisor. My dad had become a support or assistant manager. So I'm like in the family business working at Walmart, right? And then this girl brings me into this world of we could make more money. You could make more money. She worked at Walmart too, but she was like, there's other jobs out there, right? She was going to college. She had her graphic design degree, and she started inspiring me to go look. And so I looked around, and what did I look for? I didn't look for smart jobs. I looked for grind jobs. And there was this job that everybody told me was the highest paying job in the city. Go work for Gold Medal Bakery. And I went from making $8 an hour to making $21 an hour. And all I had to do was show up at a ridiculous third shift. Right? I had to show up at 10 o'clock at night and go home at like 10 o'clock in the morning. And they would pay me $21 an hour. And all I had to do was work my ass off, sweat, 120-degree weather inside the bakery, and carry these 400-pound racks. I grabbed two in each arm, so it's 800 pounds on either side, and I just pulled them to where they needed to go. And like I was getting a workout. I didn't have any. There was no conversation. I'm an introvert, so this was like the greatest job on the planet for me. But I wasn't seeing my family, and I did that for 2 years. And then she whispered in my ear again. She's like, you should really get a degree. You really should go and get an education. Because I had stopped as soon as I could get out of homeschool. I went and I took 2 classes in college to get my GED, and then I was done. And she convinced me to go back to college. And I went for business management with a degree in marketing, and I never finished that degree. But what I did do in college was I took business math, and I took accounting 1 and 2, and I took Excel. And Excel changed my life. From the point of understanding Excel, how it could take math and it could math into the future. It could predict and create all these algorithms. I became a master Excel trainer later on in my later career. I actually went out and worked for Johnson Johnson. They were like, Excel at this level? Here, teach our vice presidents. And I became a teacher of Excel. That was my first thing I taught on. And that was all due to being told by a girl, you should go make more money. A girl I cared about. Like, women will push you.
Absolutely. So you're working these jobs, you're going to school, you're trying to get this stuff figured out. What was the breaking point for you with the W-2, earning? How did that kind of go? And when did you be like, when were you actually like, hey, I really need to get in real estate. I know the power of I can see the power of real estate.
It's crazy, man. There's a movie out there called The Office, and it's called Office Space.
Office
And
space.
Office Space, where he's sitting there and he's like, yeah, TPS reports. I said, like, when she put that year of like college in my head, I'm here working manual labor for my entire life. I said I could do that. I could sit in a cubicle. That seems like a break. I could do that, and then I could move up. I'm pretty sure, like, if my hustle, I'll be in that office space and I'll move up. And that movie changed my life. The simplicity of that life. His journey at the end was to get out of the office. My journey
Yeah,
was to get into the office. I
I
was
was
like, dude,
gonna
if
say
all I
it's
got to do
kind
is
of
that.
opposite of what the movie was about, but it's still valid. You saw that you could do the office stuff, so you wanted to give it a shot.
So I switched. I got a taste for 1099 when I worked for Computer Associates. They finally gave me a full-time job, 4 years into it, and I just said, okay, I'm going to 1099 again. And Johnson & Johnson gave me an opportunity, and I 1099 for them as an analyst, and then I switched over to Coca-Cola. I started getting into this recruiters were calling me, man. The recruiters were like, dude, you want to make $35? And I was like, hell yeah, sign me up, Coca-Cola, let's go. I would just jump job, 6-month contract, 6-month contract. And I ended up back at Johnson & Johnson. They called me back for a sales vice president of sales administration position. and that was like it was $35 an hour, and they were giving me full-time benefits and everything. The first time I wasn't a 1099 in 4 years. And I remember going into that job and 6 months into it saying, I have beat the game, yeah, even though I was only making 30. It's at the time, remember, I was a guy who was used to making 40, right? So I'm making 75 plus I had two rental properties. I had bought two rental properties at the same time that I was at Johnson & Johnson. And I just told my wife, I called her one day and I was actually crying. I was like, I don't have to put up with this BS anymore. I was crying because I was frustrated by my boss. Like they wanted me to do stuff I don't want to do, and that had never been a problem my entire career. But now that I was making more money than I'd ever made, I just said, dude, I want to go and do rental property. Like I was buying houses, Ian, from my lunch. I was day trading on my lunch while I was working at Johnson & Johnson, and I was buying houses at my lunch. I was listening to Bigger Pockets. I go out on lunch, and I listen to Bigger Pockets in my car, and then I come back in. I was planning my escape, man. I was planning the escape to get out. And one day I just called her. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I could hear the disappointment in her voice. She's like, well, if that's how you feel, like, okay. Because she had quit her job 6 months earlier. And I was doing sales for her job. We had built this company uh, where we were actually selling wedding invitations. So I was like actually pulling the lists, calling people who were getting married, all of that research, and we were closing sales. So I was like, I can do that part time and I can do my real estate part time. And I did the math. We got the money, right? I got 25 grand sitting here. I can afford our bills for 2 years. This is the right time for me to do that. I go home and I could tell she's not happy with me, but I quit. All right. First time, I quit. She wasn't happy. 2 weeks later, she asked for a divorce. And that was because I was supposed to be that stable guy working, and she had ended up with my cousin. We were working out with my cousin every week, every day after work. We were going and working out together, and she had this infatuation with him, and I guess from being in close quarters for an hour working out every day, and that's kind of where that whole spiral of the divorce started. But I'm thankful for it now, Ian, even though that was a phase of a lot of crying, if I can admit and be
Yeah.
vulnerable. I was,
Yeah.
I was crying at work, and then after I'd quit, I had no support system. Like there was literally no work to go to. I was the idiot, right? I was the idiot who quit my job. I was the idiot who was getting divorced, and I was failing on all fronts. And it was tough to talk to my family about. It was tough to talk to my friends about. Nobody could quite grasp why I was changing the way I was changing, why I was becoming this person. And I blame it all on the Bigger Pockets podcast, and I'm thankful for it. The books they would tell me to read got me thinking, man. I'm reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm like, wait, hold on. I'm reading Richest Man in Babylon. I'm thinking this is different. Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, like it unlocked me. That's really the book that made me start increasing my income. I went to one of their events, and the guy on stage was like, we need people to teach this. The crazy part is, Ian, I walked into that event, like a button-up shirt, untucked, and everybody else was wearing suits. The event's called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, the Millionaire Mind Intensive. And I'm thinking everybody in the room's rich. They're all suited up. Like they're all like successful and like successful people. I'm in there thinking I got in for free on accident, right? I'm thinking I snuck in for free, and like I don't belong in the room. I'm sweating like the whole time, sitting there taking notes. And he says, like, if you don't feel like you belong here, then I need you to take the most notes to be the most successful. If you feel like you got into this place and you don't belong in this room full of successful millionaires, then you have the responsibility to go out and be successful. And then we need people to teach from stage. I just took it internally. I was like, well, okay, that's me. Yep, I don't belong here. I definitely snuck in, and I got to go become successful. And I got to do what he's doing because he's like, there's not enough people doing what we're doing. And his coaching at the time was 5,000. I couldn't afford it. I had no money, man. I made 16,000 that year. Like that was my year of making nothing. Went from 75 to making absolutely nothing. And I just made the promise. The only thing I could do was go in, be successful, and I made a commitment in that room to do it, to make my first six figures. And although it sucked, I made 90,000 as an agent that year, and it was my second year as an agent, 90,000 that year, and then made 25,000 for my rental properties. So I made 115. I set the goal. I made 17,000 the year before, and I set the goal to make 100,000. I broke it. So I'm a big fan of live events. I'm a big fan of pressure and pain and messing things up a little bit. I don't think anybody should quit their job until they got it stable and do things right. Because I stacked up credit cards, paid for coaching programs, busted my ass. I moved into a closet. Right, I had an office I was going to start, and then I had to move into my brother's house. I lived on his couch for a little while. Then I lived with a girlfriend for a little while. And then I moved into the closet in my office for a little while. It's just moved so many times. I was just like a vagabond. I was like, man, like whatever it takes to build this business, no pride, full humility. But I was walking around with this banner of always work with the best. So it was like I was this superhero by day, and at night I was just trying to hold my shit together. Just like, dude, don't cry. You're in a closet right now. I'm sleeping on a cot. Like, don't cry. You're fine. It's all gonna be temporary.
It'll get better from here, I promise. Just got to keep grinding.
It's like, just stay in the game, bro. Stay in the game.
Yeah. So it sounds like you kind of got your start in kind of smaller multifamilies. Like you said, you bought your first home, then you got a three house. I think it was kind of one of the next ones that you purchased. Um, what what prompted you to start to get into multifamily investing? What was like your first deal, and how did that come along, and what did that look like?
Yeah, so I was cutting the grass on my single family house at the time. I lived in Taunton, and I was cutting the grass, and I remember saying, "I'm the Lord of the land." I'm cutting this quarter acre, and I'm like, "Wow, look at all this grass! I'm the Lord of the land. I'm the landlord." And I remember my grandfather was the landlord. I just remember back to my grandfather saying, my favorite hobby. I was like, "What is your favorite hobby, Grandpa?" And he was like, "A beer in one hand and a hammer in the other." So that's my life. I'm a landlord, and I started thinking like, "Oh, I own property." And then I was like, what kind of landlord am I? The the landlord of ants and worms and grass? I don't have any tenants that pay me. I got my dogs, they don't pay. And I started realizing something was wrong, and I just that's when bigger pockets came into my life. I started looking for the answers to get out of the rat race. I started doing the spreadsheets. I started looking at real estate very seriously and realized that if I bought a house a year, over 10 years, I'd have 10 houses. And it wasn't very complex. It was like reasonable. They would start buying houses for me. Like, not even with the refinances, the cash flow would be enough down payment to go and buy the next house. So I started calling lenders, and they all said no. I was like, what do you mean no? Well, you own a single family home. You're not going to own or occupy a multifamily. You need to bring 20% down or 25% down, which I didn't have. I was only making 40,000 a year. My wife was making 40,000 a year, and she did not want to save anything towards multifamilies, so she was spending it all, and I was saving these little amounts. And so I sold the house. I put it on the market on accident. A realtor showed up, and she was like, "Let's list it." And I convinced my wife. I was like, "Let's list it. Let's see what they get us. If they get us this, it'd be a no-brainer. We could buy a nicer house." But then I changed the plan on her as I was learning about multifamily, learning about real estate. I ended up shifting and saying, like, why don't we buy a three family, and then we could buy a house. Like, if we buy a three family that pays for the single family house, that makes way more sense. And then I changed the plan again. We moved. We couldn't get the three family to close. This is 2012, like foreclosures, short sales. This house we had under agreement to close the same day that we were closing our house, and kept getting kicked. So we moved in with my dad. It's crazy, right? Moving with my parents, and it took 10 months to close that house, which was pretty tough on the relationship, living, inside of an apartment again in my dad's house. Not all of our stuff was unpacked. So it was emotional for her, and that led to a lot of challenges. But for me, I used the money from the sale of the first house to buy the second house and the third house. FHA on the three family, and then we did our first investor loan on the two family, which it was 109,000. So all I needed to bring was $29,000 to the closing table, which I had from literally the sale of the previous property. And that was kind of the beginning. Now, when I sold those houses, I made $300,000 from selling them. There was just crazy equity. I'd held them for 4 years. So it was a start from an $8,000 CD that I had built, right? Saving money all the time. The $8,000 CD bought me the first house. And then from there, it was savings plus the sale of the house led to the next house. That's something we call pyramiding. So I sold a single family to buy a three family and a two family. I doubled the amount of buildings I owned, and I 5x'd the amount of units that I had. And I went from paying $1,400 a month to making $1,400 a month and living rent free. And it was just, this kind of happened over a year between selling that house and then buying these two. And I was living rent free with my dad. So I went back, kind of a lot of parents, allow their kids to come back. I'm very blessed. Not everybody does, but it gave us a year to save too. And so that jumping of capital in a short period of time, it gives you an unfair advantage as a real estate investor. Like to be able to sell something tax free, I sold the owner occupied property tax free, made the 35,000, rolled some into the three family, rolled the rest into the two. That became kind of a force of, once I sold the next one, it was 150,000. I bought three houses. And then I sold the next one, 150,000. I bought three houses. And so it really started expanding up. After that, I brought in partners, and my partner had a quarter million. He was sitting on 200,000, and we invested with that. We bought together 20 something units in 6 months. It was just a short period of time. I had 22 units, and then at the end of that year, we had an extra 20 units. It was crazy because partnership, his money just was stacking up and growing. I was putting everything on credit cards. The crazy part, yeah, and I was contributing via doing all the work and putting everything on credit cards. So he was bringing cash, and I was still supplementing and bringing capital in a different way with creative financing, which I learned from those courses I took that put me over leveraged in my credit, which I learned from the divorce. So all of those skills that were from terrible times actually created the capacity to be able to run this machine pretty well.
There's a moment when you're in, I think, fixing up the three family or something like
Yep.
that, and you look out the window and you say, I'm going to own this whole block. Can you talk a little bit about that in that moment?
So I had just gotten the call from my wife, and she said, "I want the divorce. I'm serious." And I sat down in a bucket, and I was looking around at this renovated apartment, and I seriously considered taking my life. I was done. I was no longer interested in being here. I was a loser. I was the ultimate loser, and I just thought, give me one reason to be here. And I thought of my dad, and I was like, my dad would not be happy, but not enough, right? And I thought of my brother, and I said my brother wouldn't be happy, not enough. And I just said, God, like, give me something, give me a reason to stay on this planet and do something meaningful. And the thought came into my mind, like, if you could learn this money thing, then I would teach it to anybody. Just it went back to that speaker, who I had seen on stage, and I asked God, I was like, just put somebody in my life who shows me the way, and I will do whatever they say, and I will build wealth, and I promise everything I build, I will teach, and I will show, and I will give back and contribute. And I stood up, and I felt this chill, and I looked out the window. I was looking out the kitchen window over at the property I owned, a property I had under agreement, and just multifamily, multifamily, multifamily. And I said, I'm going to own this block. And I knew it. It was like pure knowledge. It was like understanding. It was like looking back at the past. Like I know that I'm going to own this. And from that point forward, I didn't stop, man. Like from that point forward, it was just on a man on fire to learn. Sleep wasn't important, food wasn't important, people's opinions of me wasn't important anymore. It was grind and do and test and experiment and document. That's like all the books I write are because I was writing what I was learning as I was going through it, so I wouldn't forget it. I didn't want to forget any of the pain or the process or the systems. But there was a very low point there, and then all low points lead to very good points. So if somebody's listening and they're saying, "Man, I'm thinking about taking my life," just hang in there a few more seconds. God usually gives you some sort of answer, and I'm thankful for that. I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have what I have today. I wouldn't have. I've trained over 1,000, 10,000 people. I've got my DM blows up every single day with people saying thank you, right? So I know the pain of it, and I also know you got to have those moments. If you don't have that moment, you may not be that big, which is okay too. Nothing wrong with getting three or four multifamilies, retiring, being fine. No, not everybody needs to do what we're doing. The goal is to get to 10,000 now because I needed an arbitrary number to aim at that was really high and probably keep me busy for a few years. But this year I picked up 450, and it's only 4 months in. So, so we're probably going to be at 1,000 by the end of this year. My guess is 5 years from now we'll have that 10,000 units and be setting bigger and better goals.
Is that when you found your why at that moment?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people's whys change over their lifetime. That was for sure my why for 5 years. For sure, those 5 years, my why was just teach. I've just got to get to the point where I'm smart enough to teach people, where I'm sophisticated enough to teach people, where I can give back. And then more recently, my why has been the families. More recently, I just said, "Man, okay, I've taught for 5 years, but all the teaching hasn't really created the impact I was looking for." And I started going back into operations, looking back at like the families I have an impact on, those tenants, and I said, those people actually have families. Those people actually are living in houses with no heat, houses with no water, houses with no electricity, houses with mold, and they're staying there because their vouchers are keeping them there, or they can't get rent anywhere else. And uh, I said, that's where I want to spend my time. So I started teaching the community. I was like, guys, you got to go invest in these areas. Like, go out and have this impact. Like, we need to take care of these families. And I couldn't get anybody to do it. So this past year, I told my wife, I was like, we're going to go do it. I can't be the man who just teaches. I got to be the man who does. And I started buying last year, about 35 units last year. This year, we bought 450. And we're going to keep buying. We're just going to keep acquiring. And it's funny because now people are watching me do it and they're doing it. It's almost like teaching alone wasn't enough. I had to lead from the front. And now that I'm acquiring, there's people buying in the same community as me, buying and doing the same strategy as me. And that's really what I had always wanted. My mentor used to tell me, "Why are you teaching people? You're going to create your competition." And I was like, "Dude, I'm trying to get my replacements. I'm really trying to get other people to do the work. I don't want to do the work. I'm doing the work. It pays very well. It's very rewarding, but I'm doing it because I just see the demand, and I really want everybody else to go do that. But I couldn't get them to do it from stage. I had to do it from here's the building I just bought. Like these are buildings that I own behind me. That's 500 units back there, and that's a vision board that I set up. And I said, okay, we got them under agreement. I got to put that vision board there till we close. And then once I close, I got to get them to 100% occupancy. And once they're at 100% occupancy, I'm gonna put them off to the side. I'm gonna get another vision board, and so we can lock down the next ones.
A bigger vision board for a bigger property.
You got it.
You teach people about doubling your unit count every year. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that strategy and what it can do for someone who's just getting started?
Yeah, that is so we call it pyramiding. So part of our mission, so I build millionaires on the 52 weeks to wealth. We have a whole year to double your income, double your net worth. So part of that is just double your portfolio. The easiest way to do that is double your portfolio. You can double your portfolio in a year, you can double it in 6 months. You could 5x, right? Or you could do what I did, I 10x my portfolio in a 6 month period. So it is possible to do it at all different scales. I think it's part of what drives me is to show that it's possible. So people are like, oh, you can't do it in this market. Well, I do it in this market. You can't do it without any money. Well, I just did it without any money. You can't do it with poor credit. Well, okay, well, I did that deal. My credit was 580. Yeah, I'm back to 800. But during that deal, that's where my score was. And it's so like I still invest for that to be able to say, look, handle objection with my own reality. Here's what I actually just did. But the concept behind coming to Cleveland and doing all of these different projects, it goes back to the grit, man. It goes back to the discipline. It goes back to the core why, the core reason. And I think if I were to answer the question, I would say time is my enemy, and I look at every day like how do I kill this enemy? Right, I'm running out of time, and this thing is going to eat up my day at the end of the day, and what is the fastest path to wiping that out? It's you got money and you got time, and how you spend it is if you're not doubling, just like I think so. People have come to me with a goal. I want to make $1 million every year, and say, okay, well, here's how many units you need to have to do that. And I built a spreadsheet that goes up to 5 billion. So some people are like, I want to be a billionaire. And by the way, it's the people coming to me who want to be a billionaire who have literally nothing to rub against. So I'm like, dude, go make $100,000. Let's do something first. And so I built the spreadsheet that just doubles. So I can put a person wherever they're at. And I then went and created what's it called? Depreciation schedule on the side. So if your property was worth $5 million, here's what your depreciation schedule would look like. It's like 375. And so I take a person's income level and let's get tax free. Like that's stage one of your high income earner. Let's just get you tax free. Okay, well, you need to own a building that's $2 million so you can depreciate it 27 and a half years over the course of the building's valuation. And that's kind of the start of where I started saying double your income, double your net worth was if you bought enough, you could. And all you had to do was one purchase a year. It didn't have to be. So all the gurus are like, I flipped 100 houses. I flipped 200 houses. I don't care about how many flips you did. That doesn't create financial freedom. What I care about is how many units are cash flowing, not how many units you own, how many units are cash flowing and operating really well. So the double your net worth, double your income created the double your units every year. So if you sell sometimes you have to sell, sometimes you pyramid, you sell 20 units to buy 40 units, sometimes you sell 20 units to buy 300 units. Or sometimes the bank just needs to know that you got 20 units. They'll let you go finance 60 units. But if you're trying to buy a 60-unit property you've never bought a multifamily property before, you're in trouble. In fact, I just got off the phone with a guy where he's my consultant, so he's doing the refinance for me on this property, and the bank is giving me a hard time. The bank's like, dude, this kid is invested, he's gonna refinance 400 units. He only just bought the other 80, and he's only carried 50 for the last few years. Why should we give him money? Like we need to get some other people on the call on the loan. And he called me with that. And I said, bro, I'm the greatest operator that's ever lived. I'm the greatest operator of all time that's ever lived. If they don't want to do the loan, I'll go somewhere else. And I said, I moved out here because I saw this property failing. I moved my family here because I saw it failing. If you look at my operations in the last 30 days, you can see the tick up of what we've done. We've increased occupancy. We've decreased the complaints. We've decreased the expenses. In it was a 10% increase in NOI. I was like, you want to see this thing expand? You need me in the loan. You need me on this deal. He calls me back 5 minutes later. He's like, dude, I sold you the same thing you just sold me. And they said, this guy's a monster. I want to do the deal with him. It's like just you just go back with that. Like, here's my story of how I'm going to change this. And here's my proof. And the bank's perception can change of you. But if I didn't have the 50 units for the last 4 years, that wouldn't have been in existence. And even that was by the skin of my teeth. So you can get things, but you have to have something, right? If you had a duplex, cool. They'll probably let you go do a 10 unit, no problem. If not, you may have to bring a partner on. You may have to bring sponsors on. So it is you got to do something. You got to get something. There's a financial resume. All the flips don't count. Doesn't matter how many flips you've done. They don't count when you go into these multifamilies. So you need the multifamily financial resume in order to get access to bigger and bigger deals. Or you bring somebody on who has access, sponsors, or I've sponsored people's loans, and that gets me equity, gets them access to a deal they never would have closed. I don't like to do it unless it's somebody I know very, very, very well. And I know, like, if they've been trained by me, if they're my mastermind, I trust them because I trained you and I know they're receptive to my coaching. But even then, I have to feel like they don't need my coaching. I don't want to risk my name, my reputation, and my capital in a deal that's not going to close or get to fruition. Or even worse, I'm going to have to take over. And now that's a rough position between me and the student because that's like, you clearly failed and I had to come save you. So we are very cautious about those types of deals, but they are available, and people will do it all the time. Right? I was on the phone with a wholesaler then trying to turn him around. I'm like, bro, you need to go buy multifamily. He's like, can't. I don't have money. I'm like, dude, you just need to go get a small enough multifamily. And he's, well, I should syndicate. I was like, do not syndicate. You're 21 years old. You have no money. You have no experience. What you need is a 10 unit and a partner with 150,000, 180 who's going to go in with you. That gives you the 10 unit, 20, 12 unit experience. And now you don't need that partner in the future, or you can bring them in the future. Like, you just need that resume, that first one. And that first one will be done in 60 days because he's telling me he's got a 5-year plan. Screw the 5-year plan, bro. Like, get in today.
Yeah.
Ian, great question.
You've scaled really fast, but I want to see if you've had any, I don't want to say mistakes because the mistakes are a bad word. Have you had any valuable learning lessons along your journey?
Yeah, my partner for the last 9 years called me yesterday and he asked me, he said, hey, bro, how's everything really going? Like, because I see you on social media and I know the posts. I know how you operate. I know you're very positive. I know you're always putting the right stuff out there. I said, well, you saw the post I made about air conditioners, right? I had air conditioners stolen. He's like, yeah, you know what? I did see that. It's a nice little change in your content. Like, I saw some of the trauma and some of the pain out there. But he's like, tell me how it really is. What's really going on in your life? He's like, I got 45 minutes. I'll listen to you. Tell me what's going on. And I told him, I was like, Ron, I had somebody die in a building last week. We've got an inspection that's coming in. Just cut a check for $117,000 for renovations last month. I'm doing a draw. I'm like working late at night to go and put all the invoices together to get the draw from the bank so I can get another 200,000 back in the account to go and burn 2 weeks from now. And the timeline is running tight. Another property, the city's not giving me the ability to go in, turn my units, and I've got these 2 units that are just vacant, and I just want to convert them into condos, and they won't let me do it. They're holding me back the last 3 months. I got another building where Roto-Rooter gave me a $30,000 bill for what should have been a $3,000 project that I can't fight it because they did the work, and and I said, and I'm raising capital right now, and I got 27 investors who've invested anywhere between 50 to 500,000 with me, and I got a lot more I got to go raise because the next deal I'm going to do is going to be a $4 or $5 million raise. And I said, man, I don't know about the bandwidth. I don't know if I have enough time in the day to reach all of these calls to deal with all the people who don't have money, to still give them guidance and help and support. And then the people who do have money that are 90 days out, who aren't ready to invest today, and the folks who are on the fence about, well, I don't know if I should, or I don't, and I'm like on those calls building these systems to funnel them through. So biggest mistake, that's a day, Ian, right? That's a day of pain. And the pain changes each day. I just fired somebody, so they were causing a lot of drama on a property, and I had kicked out a gang a month ago in Cleveland. We had to kick out a gang out of a unit, and that was intense. I had 3 security guards there, and our security staff was there, plus the FBI and the police, which was insane. Turns out my property before I bought it was on the news, CNBC, for being the worst building in the city, and I didn't own it then, sort of, but I am on the AO for February. I was sort of the owner during that shit happening, and so I kind of have to own up to the fact that I was involved in some level, uh, and now that's why I moved here to clean it up. But let's say the days are full of pain and pressure, and my son is 10 months old, and he's the sweetest thing in the world. And when I see him or Dorina, they just give me that look of like, it's okay, you're doing wonderful. I perk up, man. It's like, I'll just crush it. Biggest lesson I give a real estate investor, I ended up over leveraged in 2019. Bought a property that was worth 2.4 million. I bought it for 900,000, completely used hard money and private money, and I couldn't refinance it out for 14 months. COVID, none of the banks would touch anything that was an HOA. None of the banks would do a big portfolio like this. And I ended up getting to a company called Corvest, and they did a $2.5 million refinance, took that and all the units. It took 100 units and they put it into one big portfolio loan. But that 14 months was the worst 14 months of my career. You know, it was like my life was the divorce. In fact, maybe even my son, the day my son was born might have been, I tell Dorina, this was like the worst day of my life because I thought I was going to lose her. She was, C-section. Like I'm holding my son, the greatest precious gift in my life, but I'm also thinking I'm going to lose the most important person in my life who's been with me for the last 5 years. And so the couple of painful moments in my life that year financially was the worst. Like I could think of like nearly losing my wife, actually losing my wife, and not to death, but and then 14 months of hard money, 2.5 million. That's $25,000 a month, not including insurance, no amortization, for 14 months, not sure that we were ever going to be able to refinance this portfolio. And the day we did, it was like I looked at my partner, I looked at Ron, I said, "Bro, I think we just won the game." I said to him, I said, "We're back in the game, man." And it's interesting because the LLC he created for that property was called Back in the Game LLC, which I still own today. But it was out of turmoil and pressure, we learned so much about operations, how to lean out the machine, how to get like pull on favors from contractors, get them on 30-day notes, like, hey, I can't pay you this week, I'll pay you in 30 days, like getting them to agree, getting them to do PayPal so we can pay it on cards, like credit card monopoly, all sorts of stuff to survive, not paying the city, not paying water and taxes for certain months to get to this end date, which I don't suggest anybody do, but cheapest money out there is city money. So we we did we delay and we push. My partner now, he calls it the two-step. He's like, those terrible times, if you're bleeding and you're dying and you somehow survive, he's like, you'll never die again. Like you'll be able to be such a powerful operator because you always operate that way, even when there is money in the bank. You always operate that way, even when there's cash flow and things are working out. You still operate because you know the pain of what it's like to be behind and like struggling, but you didn't give up.
Love
So
that.
don't over leverage.
Yes, love that. Great learning lesson for all the people out there looking to get into, bigger projects is don't over leverage. What's the mindset that new investors absolutely need to develop if they want to build long-term wealth?
The buy a property a year mindset, or the philosophy, right? I will buy a property regardless each year and make it bigger every year. There it is, double the units. So if you buy one house every year for the next 5 years and you start with a duplex, the next year it's a fourplex, you got 6 units. So the next year you're buying a 6 unit building. So year 3, you're at 12 units. Year 4, you're at 24 units. Year 5, you're at 48 units. Usually 48 units in the right market is enough to retire a person and give you enough to be busy without needing to really bring in property management. But if you want to go for the gusto and you want to exit entirely, go and buy 48 extra units and let a property manager manage that for you. And that is a mindset of stick-to-itiveness, discipline, saving the money, being tight, being a great operator, falling in love with the property, not the tenants, treating the tenants with great respect. And when I say fall in love with the property, I mean be passionate about the work you're doing there, but be willing to sell it at any moment for the next property. Right? You got to be passionate about its operations, passionate about its success as a business. Each property is a business, and the the mindset of I will not get out of this business until I am financially free is what saved me. I think it was T. Harv Eker said that in Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And when he said that, I said, I will not get out of this business until I'm a millionaire and more. And then recently I said, I will not get out of this business until I've built a fund that is $1 billion or more. And it's no longer about financial freedom, it's about impact. That fund only operates in the worst cities in the country, only operates in the worst areas in the country, only operates where families need us. They don't want to live there. We don't operate where people want to live. We're not operating in luxury. We're not operating in places where people are like, can't wait to move in. We're operating where they don't have a choice, and we give them that dignity back of a clean and safe house. And that's a space underserved by operators, underserved by syndicators, underserved by people in this business. You look at everybody who's on a podcast is like A class, A class, A class, A class. Well, uh, I'm I'm working on two strategies. One, all my investors are financially free because I pay 12%. So I'm a very high payout and I'm consistent. So I have this mission of making sure my millionaires are financially free. So I told my 100 people, I was like, guys, y'all don't have $1 million with me yet, but if you did, you'd be making $10,000 a month. I'll coach you to that point. And so I just have my 100 people, I coach them and I focus on them and they lend to me over time. And then the other side of it is my operating staff is like, we go into the hood and we make it good.
I love that motto. We go into the hood and make it good. Can you explain the 100 millionaires, kind of how it got started and like where it's headed now? I love the movement.
Yeah, man. So it's 100 millionaires who are inspired to build 100 millionaires. So all of my millionaires, beyond just investing with me and becoming financially free, they've made the commitment to pick up the phone if somebody asks, hey, how do I do what you did? To tell their story. Some of them are speakers, some of them are not. Some of the great operators. Hey, if somebody in this community calls you and asks for help, will you just jump on the phone? So they're all committed to building 100 millionaires. Maybe not as aggressively or tactically as I'm doing it, but they've all taken on the mission. And it came from a whiteboard session with me and my wife, Dorita, 5 years ago. And she said, you are clearly not doing anything. She said, you're clearly the king of Fall River. You're clearly the top of what you can do. And you're resting on your laurels. What would be a good goal that would keep you moving? I think I told you at the beginning, Ian, it's always a woman that inspires me to do something more aggressive. And I said, well, she's like, what do you do? I said, I build millionaires. It just rolled off my tongue. I was a realtor and I was building millionaires. I knew that my guys were building wealth because I was helping them buy multifamily. And she said, how many have you built? I said, I don't know, like 3, 4. And as she was talking, I was like 9. and, and then she says, how many are you going to build? And my first number was 10. And I realized I'd already built 9. I was like, that's probably too easy. So I said, I'll build 100. And she said, 100 new ones or 100 of the past? I said 100 new ones, new with the new philosophy to have. Because I was an agent and that was very easy to build millionaires. This was, I'm going to go teach to build millionaires. And I will tell you, Ian, teaching to build millionaires has been significantly harder than being an agent. Agents build millionaires. Literally, your job is to help them buy the next property. So it's like agents generally, if they're good agents, generally truly do build millionaires. You know, if your client doesn't have any money, go find them the money. Get them the hard money lender. Get them this. Like, if they don't have the credit, teach them credit. Like, get them in front of a mortgage broker or whatever to get the credit right. So, like, as an agent, I was slaying the build millionaires game. When I shifted to coaching, it slowed down like significantly. I built 37 millionaires in the last 6 years. I'm not crying about it. I just know that my lack of activity is what slowed down the progress. So this past year with the 100 million, as I said, I'm going to go take us to the next level, and I'm going to actually put their money to work. So I'll be doing the projects, I'll be doing the work to I need their credit and I need their existing capital. So that's how we're taking it to the next level. I'm taking these 100 millionaires I have and making them financially free. These are accredited investors, but they're not all financially free. And it's crazy, right? Because they're house rich, cash poor. They have the properties, they have assets, but they're not getting dividends. They have stocks, but they're not getting the rent checks. So that has been the kind of the motto. The change of it is I'm going to get 100 people to have $1 million invested with us, where I'm making 100 people financially free for the remainder of my existence. So that's 100 people who are literally getting a check for $10,000 every single month. That's kind of the evolution. Same motto, same cup. Just I changed how I felt about it over every 5 years. I go back and I look at my why and I readjust a little bit.
That's great. I love that you're really working towards building wealth from people that probably otherwise wouldn't be able to go down that path. It sounds like you do work with a lot of newer investors and kind of get them into the right mindset, get them doing the correct activity, making the life changes that they need to make to become a millionaire.
And it's so that side of it, I do less of that unless they're really close. So I use programs like yours and other coaches to do the intro stuff, wholesaling, flipping, rehabbing, small multi. I really do leverage other programs now, and
Okay.
because I'm reserved, right? I have this 100, and I really just focus on this crew. And every so often, I see somebody not taking action, I will have the conversation, say, hey, look, I'm going to make space for somebody else. There's a waiting list of people who want to be in this group. And so I've gotten to the point where I'm committed to these people, and I needed help for outside of that, because there are people who follow me who just are nowhere near accredited, nowhere near the effort or the experience. They really need the beginning training. They really need to go and get the wholesaling class. They really need to go and flip a property or two, and they need to buy their first house. Some of them just need to call an agent and be like, I'm going to go buy a house. And so those folks, that's why I create content. I really shifted from just teaching like behind the scenes to I'll create some content for the beginners so that they can go out and learn and do without taking my time. Content is scalable. These podcasts are scalable. It's so valuable to be able to just read it, listen to it again, or share it with somebody. I think that's probably the path I'm gonna have to continue going down, because you end up with less and less time every day, and I'm sure you notice this. There's just less and less that you can say yes to, and you have to start saying no to a lot of things. And the focus for me has to be taking care of my 100, making sure they reach their targets, their goal. Because if I do that, we're going to go, that's the one thing, such that by doing it, if I focus on these 100, those folks give me the money. When I have their money, I have to deploy it. And I only deploy it within those 10 markets that need that help. So it's been a way for me to focus my activities, just having a KPI that if I do this, everything else kind of is automatic.
That's
That's how I
so
help. Help through a
that's so great.
KPI.
I love what you're doing. I know you're a huge book reader. We on this show, every episode we do a free book giveaway. And so I have some here for you to take a look at. I don't know if you can see them.
I have every single one of those books on that shelf. Oh
So,
yeah, I love it.
so these are the ones you probably can't read them, but we got the 10X rule, we got the Rich Dad Poor Dad, the Think and Grow Rich, got the Go Giver. So to our listeners, if you guys are interested, we are giving away one free book. All you need to do is like this episode and comment which book you would like. And one lucky winner from every episode will get it shipped to their house or whatever mailing address you send us. So make sure to like and comment which book you want. And again, we'll choose a winner 5 days after the air date. So, Gualter, thank you so much for being on the show. Your story is proof that no matter what happens or where you start, it really just matters how consistent you are and how big you're willing to think and grow. Whether it's your first duplex or the next 100-unit deal, it all starts with taking action, building a team, and investing in yourself. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.